Hello, so today I'm going to be talking to you about the film 10 Meter Tower, which is a documentary made by Maximilian van Artreich, and I have not pronounced that correctly, as well as Axel Danielsen. Firstly, documentary as a genre is something that emerged in the late 19th century. It's been described as portraits of real life, so using real life as the raw material, which is then reconstructed by filmmakers who make decisions in terms of what story they want to tell, how they're going to tell it, to who, and for what purpose. Bill Nicholas is the man who identified the 6 modes of documentary film, and he states that these establish a loose framework of affiliation within which individuals may work. Today I'm going to discuss and explore 2 of these modes, which are most relevant to 10 Meter Tower. This includes the observational mode as the primary mode, as well as an element from the reflexive mode of documentary. In terms of content, 10 Meter Tower is a 16-minute long documentary, which is set at an indoor swimming pool with a 10-meter high diving platform. The film features 20 men and women who range from the age of 9 and 78 years. Each of them are faced with the same daunting task, which involves climbing up to the top of the 10-meter tower, walking to the edge of the platform, and trying to jump off. The fascination of this film is in the way it captures quite a raw and what looks like quite a genuine emotion from the participants as they try to challenge some of these deeply instinctive fears, which viewers don't often get to see on screen. The modes of documentary, it does appear to be slightly multimodal, but the observational mode is definitely the dominant and primary mode for 10 Meter Tower. This is because the film is focused on the objective reality, and it adopts that fly-on-the-wall sort of approach which is evident in direct cinema and cinema verite as well. And it sort of places the filmmakers and makes them neutral observers. So they are unseen throughout the whole film. They don't attempt to engage with the participants or influence their actions and the events as they are unfolding. Their goal is really to remain as inconspicuous as possible and to document the event as accurately as possible. So they're trying to do this and not influence and impact the actions of participants too greatly, but the fact is the presence of the camera and the crew does appear to be felt by some. This was noticed by me when I saw the elderly woman glance directly at the camera in a split second as she contemplates her decision, and the fact that this minor acknowledgement is included in the film, it puts sort of into perspective that these are real people, but it also reinstates the film's aims to remain transparent and as truthful as possible. They further acknowledge the constructed nature of the film by showing the microphones which line the top of the platform. So this is seen throughout the duration of the film, and that awareness of the filmmaking process is a characteristic of the reflexive mode of documentary, because that's all about cinematic transparency and acknowledging that process. The filmmakers stated that the presence of the cameras and the social pressure from the other participants kind of created more interesting behaviours from each of the individuals. It resulted in some people being more animated, some people being more uncomfortable, and some people being pressured by this force, the watchful eye and the added pressure, which almost pushed some people over the edge. The style is very closely connected to the mode of documentary, and the director and the co-director chose a pathway which was as much about observing as it was about challenging some of those apparent realities. The documentary style is based on how sound, lighting, cinematography, the editing techniques and the setting have all been sort of incorporated, executed and presented. The overall film construction itself is relatively simplistic, so this means there are minimal cuts and there's the use of natural lighting, and also a majority of the film is shot from a main stationary camera with only a few cuts to other angles. These additional angles include a wide shot which reveals the full tower and another shot which is under the water. I think these additional shots were included to maybe put into perspective the sheer height of the tower itself, and to maybe also create a bit more of a connection and develop spatial awareness for the viewers. On 3 occasions there is a bit of camera movement, so it's just a tilt downwards following a subject as they're falling through the air, and this shot's then presented in slow motion. By incorporating slow motion, it kind of adds a deeper intensity to the shot. It gives time for the viewer to reflect on what they're seeing, and it makes that moment, which already is quite significant because it's the moment they step off the platform, all the more significant when translated to screen. The editing style incorporated a split screen effect, which was used in 2 different ways. This first way was when a single camera captured 2 different people in 2 different moments in time, completing the same task. But by placing them together, you got to see how they carried out the same task in completely different ways. And this gave the viewer the opportunity to take a comparative sort of stance, and it drew focus to how varied the human behaviours were, which is the essence of the film in a sense. The second use was using 2 separate cameras, but then capturing the same moment and then having that displayed in union. The film doesn't incorporate really any music until later on, but it does incorporate room sound and the voices of the participants who are on screen, and you can sometimes hear the muffled voices of other participants standing at the base of the platform. So music was only introduced right at the end of the film, during the last minute, when a professional female diver sort of gracefully leaps off of the top of the platform to this while playing Beethoven's Symphony No. 9. And that's also presented in slow motion again. So the dramatic effect of the music and the slow motion creates a really interesting atmosphere. And for me as a viewer, it left me in kind of a state of awe and maybe admiration, as I reflected on how incredible it is that people can overcome those fears, but also how incredible it is that people can master them and turn them into a thing of beauty. The self-effacing and that modest style that's linked to observational documentary kind of creates a film which is more open to interpretation than perhaps that of an expository documentary, so different viewers, I think, would take something different away from this film. The filmmaker's objective was not to tell a narrative story, but it was more to be seen as a psychology kind of experimental study that portrays human behaviour. This explains why the modes of documentary were observational, and that element of reflexive. It also explains why the work and editing were kept to a minimum and why voiceovers were not included, nor music for the majority of the film, because these things can be used to shape, manipulate, and influence the views of the audience and how they interpret what they see on screen. So 10 Meter Tower is still manipulated by the filmmaking process. For example, I read an article which stated there were 67 people in total who participated in the film, but we only actually got to see 20 of those participants on screen. So it is important to consider the elements that are included in the film, as well as consider the things that are not included and what the reasons might have been for that. I think documentary is more an interpretation of a perceived reality, and I think to capture truth without any bias or any perspective is almost impossible. But considering the style, the content, and the documentary modes, I think that 10 Meter Tower does seem to portray and capture the realities of human behaviours in a relatively authentic way, and that's quite cool to see. Okay, that's all from me. Bye. Thank you.